Hello and welcome back to CWU Live. Now, if you are a postal member of the CWU, you will know that today the union announced a pay agreement with EP Group. Unfortunately, we're not covering that deal or doing a Q&A on it today. We should be clear, that's because we want to make sure we get everything exactly right when we do discuss it and have all the I's dotted and the T's crossed. There was already a national briefing for branches and local reps earlier today on the deal, and we'll be doing a comprehensive show on it next week. So bring all your questions for that show. For today, though, we're going to stick with our original plan, which is tied into the CWU and Royal Mail's Dog Awareness Week. And to discuss that issue, I'm joined by Jamie McGovern, the CWU's new Health and Safety Officer. Thank you so much for joining me, Jamie.
Welcome.
Jamie will also be answering any other health and safety questions you might have throughout the show, whether that's exhaustion or how to deal with heat waves. As I say, pay we're not going to be doing today, but next week, a comprehensive episode on that. Before we discuss the issue of dangerous dogs, let's go through some statistics. So this is from a press release from the CWU this week. So you can see 30,000 postmen and women attacked by dogs in the last decade, 6 dog attacks on postal workers across the UK every day, 35 dog attacks on postal workers every week, 2,000 to 3,000 dog attacks on postal workers every year, 400 dog bites through the letterbox every year, 500 postmen and women have had a finger or part finger bitten off through the letterbox in the last 5 years. That's a really shocking statistic. 80% of dog attacks on postal workers took place at the front door or on the garden path, driveway or yard. The UK dog population has surged by 3 million in the last 4 years. 10,000 people need hospital treatment following a dog attack, according to the NHS. Of course, that's not just Royal Mail workers, although I think it's potentially the case that a third of dog attacks seem to be on Royal Mail workers. I'll speak to Jamie about that in a moment. And then you can see there, £75 million a year is the cost of NHS hospital treatment for dog attack injuries. The threat to postal workers from dangerous dogs is also being covered widely in the press. So on Monday, the BBC published an article reporting on dog attacks on postal workers. The article included the story of a postal worker called Eleanor King Vasheen. And she works in Farnborough, Hampshire, and was delivering mail to a property with 2 dogs, one of which she was concerned had an aggressive temperament. And when the BBC reports this about her experience, so it says, "The dog jumped up at me and bit me 3 times just above the right knee. When I looked down, I could see the flesh on my leg hanging," she said. She started screaming, which caused the owner and his daughter to come rushing out. "I also startled the dog as it ran back into the house. I had to do my own first aid as the man and his daughter were crying," she recalled. She was then taken to A&E where her wound was treated and she was given a tetanus jab. As a result of the attack, she was off work for 3 weeks. "If I hear or see a dog now, any dog, I'll freeze. I'll literally stop and wait until the owner walks past me because there's no way I'm taking a chance. I feel as though I have to be ready to fight off an attack rather than it happen, and I'm not aware," she said. Jamie, that story, which was included in a BBC report on Monday, I think really shocking to anyone reading it. Do let us know, Eleanor, if you happen to be watching the show today. But is that a common experience?
It's becoming more common because that issue there with a serious flesh wound, that'll be categorized on a level 3 or level 4 bite scale. So each injury and each dog attack is categorized on what they call a Dunbar bite scale. So those levels of injuries are increasing. They did increase 2 years ago by about 115%. So we have seen the nature of attacks become more serious over time. So sadly, that is very typical, really, yeah.
And it sort of went down during COVID, didn't it? And then it's been going up sort of over the last couple of years. What's the explanation? Is it that people got dogs in lockdown and some of those dogs aren't particularly well trained, and therefore you've got just more dangerous dogs than you once had?
Yeah, basically that's what our research partners have told us. Dogs weren't socialized during COVID. People decided that, maybe a good idea to bring a pup into the house during COVID, and then those dogs weren't socialized. And even the dogs trusters said, that was probably one of the reasons why there's been an increase in dog attacks in the community as well, because dogs weren't socialized with people as well as they were previously before COVID.
Obviously, there was a big controversy about XL bullies. They've now been banned. Have you seen any sort of drop off in attacks after that ban came into effect, or were XL bullies a particular problem for postal workers? Is that your understanding?
Well, breed-specific legislation is a whole new area. I think we've never really agreed with breed-specific legislation, really, because our concern has always been who's on the other end of the lead. You know, the dog owner is primarily the person who is responsible for that dog. So breed-specific legislation is something you've never really agreed with, and I think our research partners have shared the same opinion. It's not necessarily about breed-specific legislation. It's more about making sure the animal is controlled. When visitors, address the property like postal workers do or parcel force workers. You know, we are all have an entitlement to be there. So, breed-specific legislation is a whole new issue, but something we've never really agreed with.
And so lots of people watching this will be thinking, look, I'm a postman or postwoman. I know this. I know that dogs, can bite me, and I know people who've been bitten by dogs, or I've been bitten by a dog. What are you doing about it? So what can you, I suppose, tell members that the CWU is dealing about the issue of dangerous dogs?
Well, there's an awful lot going on behind the scenes, really, that people may not see. We've been working with the devolved governments, certainly more so in Wales, because through our research partners, we now established in late last year that there was a new, the dog attack capital UK was a Swansea Bay area. In Wales previously, it was up in Merseyside, and that's moved down towards the South Wales area, and that's based on hospital admissions per 100,000 population. So our research partners shared that information with us prior to it going into the public domain. So we were able to see where our hotspot areas were, and then try and concentrate on partnership work, working with police forces, working with local councils, also charities, organisations, trying to get education into schools in those key areas as well, because believe it or not, school children can help us really in this, because we do see a spike during the school holidays. So education towards school children is part of our key strategy. And we've just developed something called Pause for Thought with the Pet Education Partnership to get into schools and do online webinars to educate children that when visitors call to your house, put your dog in another room or be aware your dog could become more aggressive. So there's an awful lot going on, even like working with police forces. We're trying to get more service level agreements with police forces now to make sure we are working in partnership with police forces too.
And why do you see the spike in school holidays? That's because the child opens the door, and then the dog then has access to the postman or postwoman,
Yes,
and the child's less able to control the dog than the parent would be.
correct. And obviously, from our research partners, dogs can become more defensive around children or young adults. So therefore, that risk is increased, and many children aren't aware that they should be trying to, put the dog in another room or keep the dog from accessing the letterbox, for example. Because again, now in 2020, the CWU were part of a campaign to make sure that there was court of appeal on dog attacks at letterboxes, and now postal workers now are protected at the letterboxes as well, based on the Lady Justice Carr judgment of 2020. So there was, a little bit of debate over whether postal workers were actually trespassing if their hands went through the letterbox, but now we're still protected under law. So there's no ambiguity on that now. Postal workers are protected at the letterbox too.
God, that's shocking that it was ever considered trespass to put your
Yeah.
fingers through a letterbox. Andrew Holmes says, as posties, we all understand the risks regarding dogs. However, it's the public that needs reminding constantly, not just once a year, but every week. So Andrew Holmes sort of suggesting Dog Awareness Week is all good, but we need to be, I suppose, informing the public much more regularly than that. How would you respond?
Absolutely, and we also work in partnership. There's a number of dog safety partnerships we work with, where we try and educate the public. Dog Awareness Week comes around where it's a chance for extra publicity, but basically every single week is Dog Awareness Week because the amount of attacks that we're seeing.
And cages. So talk to me about postal cages. You think if people have got dogs, they should put a cage on the inside of their door so that dogs can't get to a postie's fingers. Is that correct? Is there anything you can do to encourage more people to get one of those?
Yeah, well, it's seen as a protective measures process. It's a control measure by the dog owner, and obviously what I've just mentioned there about the Lady Justice Carr decision in 2020, postal workers are protected at letterboxes now, so we are seeing prosecutions for dog bites at letterboxes. We do see some horrific hand injuries as well at letterboxes. Finger amputations. Partial finger amputations, and these can often now result in a prosecution. So the message to dog owners really is, if your dog is being aggressive or accessing the back of a letterbox, put the letterbox cage on or an external letterbox. So then the postal worker is safe, and you as a dog owner are not at risk of being in serious trouble with the police.
And what happens if a postie does get bitten by a dog? I mean, obviously they're going to need some time off work. Is there sort of compensation they can get? Who can they complain to? Is there sort of any redress that can be sought?
Yeah, so every postal vehicle attack, basically, it's could be classed as a Section 3 offence under the Dangerous Dogs Act. Certainly needs to be reported as a crime. Obviously, there's a dog bite compensation scheme in Royal Mail, but there's also avenues to pursue compensation again based on, liability issues with the dog owner or with the employer. So there is an opportunity to pursue it, but our request really is speak to like your area safety rep or your local safety rep. There's 700 CWU safety reps out there and over 90 area safety reps. So if you do get attacked by a dog, speak to your safety rep, because they will be fully up to speed with the process.
This is interesting. So Archie McIver says no dog bites in 10 years, but 2 since we went to later starts. Do you think there could be a relationship between later starts and dog bites? I suppose it's more likely that the dog owners will be out of the house when you're posting sort of in the middle of the day as opposed to at the very beginning of it.
Potentially, and if that is like towards the time when school children are coming home and people are still out there posting, around at 3 o'clock time, most children get home from school a lot earlier these days, so there could be a link there. So we're always looking at the stats and the time of incidents, the location of incidents, to see what we can do to make more awareness on that.
And I suppose on this issue, so lots of the issues we talk about on this show, there's sort of a dispute between the workers and the employers. And there are negotiations around that, sort of every section of the union, so whether that's BT or Royal Mail or wherever. Is this an issue where there is conflict between the workforce and the employer, or is this one where basically the CWU and Royal Mail are on the same page?
I think we're largely on the same page when it comes to risks and risk management. And, dynamic risk assessments are always there to protect everybody, making sure people, protect themselves in certain occasions when they'll see a dog roaming loose or they believe there's a risk there. Then we encourage them to follow the process under the management of dog attack risk standard. People should not be putting themselves in any level of risk or danger by approaching a dog or an area where there's dogs dangerously out of control. Largely on the same page. We like to think we're doing more on near misses and pre-bite events, because we now have a system where in Wales it's gone live where postal workers can report near misses or pre-bite events on a QR code. And in Wales, where it went live in I think it was in April, we had 80 near miss reports just in 1 month alone. So, we are trying to do more on the near miss issue and making councils and dog technical officers and dog wardens aware of these dogs when they're becoming dangerously out of control. So trying to tackle the issue before the bite occurs. So reporting a near misses, I think, is key for us, obviously in the CWU.
What is a near miss? Is that sort of the dog lunges at you or sort of
Yeah, so
barks at you in an
basically when a
aggressive
dog,
way?
yeah, and obviously that's still could be classed as an offence under Section 3 of the Dangerous Dogs Act. So when a dog becomes dangerously out of control, or there's a risk to you or other members of the public, all of a sudden then that is a reportable incident. So we like to act on that and make sure then there's dog owner counselling, because a lot of the dog wardens and dog technical officers, they can go out and counsel the actual dog owner about the near miss and the event that's just occurred.
Johnny A says, can't get half of light post through a letterbox without pushing fingers through. The management covers themselves by giving you that pathetic red plastic thing to do it. So suggestion from Johnny there that sort of the management say, well, you can use this red plastic thing, so it shouldn't be a problem for your fingers. Should people be more protected by Royal Mail than they are?
Well, at the moment, I mean, I know there was a lot of negative feedback about the post and peg, the red plastic tool. He's talking about there, and there is now new post and peg trials underway. Where they're like 3D printed post and peg tools. But I go back again to that Lady Justice Carr judgment of 2020. She did say at some point it is feasible that postal workers' fingers may indeed enter the letterbox. So even if they do enter the letterbox, then it is classed as a crime if the dog bites. But obviously, from our perspective, we say wherever possible, try not to make sure your fingers do not enter the letterbox.
And I suppose your health and safety officer. So, do you think that dog bites are the biggest occupational hazard of being a postman and postwoman?
My beliefs, yeah. I mean, I obviously I'm from Merseyside originally, where we had a terrible dog attack risk issue over the last decade, and we had to work in partnership with all kinds of organisations to combat it. So the numbers of dog attacks we see now are certainly, they are the biggest risk issue for me. But also now we're seeing more psychological injury from dog attacks too. That is the thing that is largely forgotten about. If we base it on the 2,000 per year number, and potentially 15% up to 300 people will need psychological support after suffering a dog attack. So we're seeing then numbers climb as well.
Let's go to a question about a different health and safety issue. So Steve says, what about the heat? It has been about 35 degrees here. The only health and safety advice from the managers was to drink more water. I haven't got any toilets on my walk, so not an option. Yeah, it sounds like a really difficult situation to be in. I mean, how would you respond to that?
It is a difficult situation, but obviously we're arguing now for concessionary rest when people drink water to allow them access to toilets. We've just produced a heat illness guide, and obviously we're in talks with the TUC about campaigning for upper limits on workplace temperatures for indoor workers and outdoor workers too. But obviously the risk assessment process that exists in Royal Mail should protect the postal workers at certain levels of heat. If it doesn't, then again, raise that up with the local reps. We're also in talks with Royal Mail about, improving the severe weather risk assessment process. But yeah, heat is a massive risk issue. There's always Section 44, the Employment Rights Act, of course, if someone believes that they are at risk. And also, people with underlying health conditions are at a particular higher level of risk when it comes to hot weather. So we try and raise awareness of that too. So there will be individual risks for individuals out there working in heat. We just want people to be aware of that and make the safe decisions when it comes to working in the heat.
Now, how would the maximum heat thing work? So if you said the maximum heat was 34 or something, would that mean if you had a heat wave where there were a few days in a row over 34, you just wouldn't have post delivered on that day, or that sort of it would be done at a different time of day, or I suppose earlier in the how would that work practically?
So what we're looking for in part of our campaign is to be a heat furlough scheme. So when the heat reaches a certain point, potentially 30 degrees, then there would be a heat furlough scheme, and the government would support that through basically legislative change. I know in 2022, when it reached 35 degrees, there was a mandatory recall of staff, outdoor workers, because a red weather warning was issued where there was a threat to life. So we want to raise awareness of the heat issue because there are serious risks out there, and one of them being, dehydration, heat illness, and it is, it's a very serious risk, and especially now with the time window, people are delivering at a time where the UV rays are most dangerous, 11 o'clock till 3 p.m. So there are risks out there for lots of postal workers, but we are in discussions with the TUC and other trade unions as well, and thankfully the HSE is speaking to us as well. The TUC and trade unions about new guidelines being issued into legislation about temperatures, because based on climate risk, it could be that it's going to get hotter and continue to get hotter over the next few years.
I've got a comment from Lyndon, who does sound like, in his office at least, they're taking the heat somewhat seriously. It says, a plus point, our office in high heat, we were allowed to start an hour earlier to get home early. Do people have a right to sort of demand that? If this guy sort of has more reasonable management than other people, could they say, you must let us start an hour earlier and end
Yeah,
an
well,
hour
that's
earlier?
that's a foreseeable risk issue. That is a robust argument. That will be seen as a control measure. If people can start earlier to then alleviate risk, that should be seen as an agreeable control measure.
Okay, back to dogs. Marquis says, posties need to understand that they have the right to withdraw from an unsafe situation, such as a dog. Scan the mail as undeliverable and let the manager know what the danger is. Is Mark right? And I suppose, if so,
Yeah.
At what point do you say it's dangerous? If you hear a sort of dog barking that sounds like a big dog behind the door, can you say, I do not want to sort of put anything through the letterbox, or I don't want to knock on that door? Or is it the case that
Yeah.
if you've heard that there's a dangerous dog in there from a previous experience, you shouldn't have to knock there? I suppose what I'm asking you is, what's the threshold? At what point do you think it would be reasonable to say, I'm putting myself in danger by
Yeah.
delivering mail through this particular door?
Yeah, well, dynamic risk assessment process, they call it look, consider, decide. With dogs, it's also about using your other senses. If you hear a dog behind a door and you believe it's a risk to yourself, then you can rightfully, refuse to deliver the mail. There is something called a P6705 sticker, which is a grey sticker, which should go on the mail. That endorses the mail to say that there was a risk there at the time of attempted delivery. But, we do see people taking risks when they shouldn't, and that is an issue. I want to get the message across that dynamic risk assessments, you know, they are there for people to use and to safeguard themselves. It's difficult often because sometimes dogs will sit silent behind a letterbox. But again, any information you know about the dogs, trust that information and make sure your colleagues are sharing information on any dangers they encounter because that exchange of information is so valuable. Keeps people safe, I should say.
So that seems like something that Gail Thomas is getting at. So they've said it is clear that all posties must let their DOM know of dogs on their deliveries to safeguard anyone who does the delivery. The post-it peg helps to a degree. Everyone needs to remain aware of dogs. For my benefit, what's the post-it peg?
Well, the poster peg is the reg peg that you described before. It's
Right.
basically like it looks like a spatula. The mail's inserted and then it's put through the letterbox to avoid the fingers going near the actual letterbox aperture. So there is that tool there, but obviously it is now there's new designs being trialed. So hopefully that tool will improve.
Yeah. So that's that red bit of plastic, sorry, that was referred to earlier.
Yes. Yeah.
Lyndon again has a situation which sounds concerning. So he says, my mate was bitten by a dog, really nasty, and he got suspended for a month till it was sorted. And he said, it sounds like the reason he was suspended is because he swore at the owner and management suspended him. Which, does that, I mean, I suppose that's probably not a particular situation you're familiar with, but is that a concern you've heard before that sort of people,
Yes. Yeah.
yeah, could you talk
I have
about
heard
that?
that. Yeah, I have heard that concern before, but we will see a stress reaction very often when a dog is dangerously out of control. So it is a crime at the end of the day. So what we say, if someone is being bitten or attacked by a dog, essentially they're a victim of a crime. So therefore, reactions need to be measured. Reactions from managers in the office need to be considered because people will react to a situation they find themselves in. It's a hugely stressful situation being attacked by a dog, being cornered by a dog, or even being in a dangerous situation where there's a dog present and you don't know how the dog is going to react. So, we need sensitivity when it comes to that, really, we do.
Oh, Lyndon actually also says a bit more advice and training to people who are not familiar and comfy reading dogs' behaviour would help. So I wonder if he's talking about the general public or people who are postmen and postwomen. So is it potentially the case that posties could do with a bit more training about sort of like how to understand? Obviously, it shouldn't be the responsibility of a postie to try and
Yeah,
interpret the intentions of a dog, but I
yeah,
suppose given
there is
given the
good advice out.
situation we're in, is it worth them sort of reading up on that?
Yeah, there is good information out there. There's something called the ladder of aggression, which anyone can read up on, which identifies when dog body language and dog behavior could create a risk. So, and that's out there. I think the Dogs Trust have put that out there. The RSPCA, Liverpool University have put some stuff out there, and that's called the ladder of aggression. And it does identify when potentially warning signs are being presented by the dog. So, a little bit of information, upskilling on that, making yourselves aware about what the ladder of aggression is, could help you make a sensible decision when out on delivery.
This is you were saying there's a particular problem in Wales. Loan to be free seems to be backing it up. So it says trouble is there are rounds here up the valleys where in reality you'd be bringing back the majority of mail due to how many rough and tough dogs there are. So if you've got if you feel like there might be a dangerous dog behind every door, then it's difficult to sort of say, well, I think this is dangerous, so I'm not going to post it because then you'd end up, I suppose, going straight back to your delivery office. I mean, he's put a lol, or they've put a lol at the end of that, so they might be half joking, but to the extent that that is a sort of serious comment, I mean, how would you respond to that?
Well, it is applied so far as is reasonably practicable, but our core belief is if there are dangerous dogs, whether it be farm dogs or dogs behind letterboxes, if the person genuinely perceives that there's a risk, then the mail should be returned. And then investigations will be underway as to why that is perceived as a risk. Is it an overreaction? Is it a genuine risk? Can a dog owner be contacted? Can a dog owner, Can a dog owner secure the dog whilst the postal worker is visiting? Or things like you mentioned, letterbox cages, external letterboxes, all these things do help.
Caldera says some letterboxes can cut your fingers as much as a dog can. New builds are the worst. Cheaply made, sharp plastic, and a lip on the inside lid to refuse mail. I know we were speaking on a recent show about the problem of letterboxes which are near the floor, which means that you're much more at risk of getting bitten by a dog. And then this is a different problem with letterboxes, that they themselves can be quite sharp. So is there, I suppose, when it comes to like building buildings or replacing doors and the like, is enough attention focused to what it's going to mean for the postie? Because obviously, I suppose the builder is looking for it to be really cheap. The resident probably wants it to look good. Is there enough regulation to say, well, the most important thing actually about your front door is that it's safe for a postie to deliver mail to you?
I don't think there's enough regulation on. Obviously, you mentioned the low-level letterbox campaign and the fact that we're campaigning for that change in legislation, because every dog has access to a low-level letterbox. But we have seen over recent years with warmer home schemes, we've seen like councils putting letterbox hoods behind the letterbox to prevent air escaping, and basically bristles and like extra insulation behind the letterbox, which makes it more difficult for posties to deliver, of course. Those letterbox hoods, if you've got a do not bend item, it becomes extremely difficult for the postie to then effectively deliver that item. So I think letterbox design is really crucial. And I think there needs to be more dialogue on that. And for us, external letterboxes work better than everything.
Yeah, so I mean, do many people have external letterboxes? I haven't seen many around, but is that something that is on the rise, or?
It is on the rise, thankfully, because obviously the responsible owner issue is being broadcast, and the media are covering it now. So lots of people now are putting more external letterboxes in. I don't know what the percentage numbers are, but we have seen an increase in external letterboxes. And we liken external letterboxes to responsible dog owners. If they're putting an external letterbox on, they're doing it because they want the mail to continue being delivered. Because if the dog is becoming dangerously out of control, then mail can be suspended. Whole streets can be suspended if there's a dog roaming loose. So it's for the benefit of themselves. They'll put an external letterbox up.
A few comments about training. So Gail Thomas says, do new entrants receive training on how to deal with dogs, which I received when I started at Royal Mail? But then Henry Lloyd says, I didn't receive any training. I was just set out on delivery. And then Lyndon says, a training video at work or the person themselves to keep them safe. Post people claiming, I think a training video at work or the person themselves to keep them safe. Post people. And then someone says, new entrants get to watch all those videos we have all seen while they are on induction. Is that how does the training work for posties from the Royal Mail? Is it just you watch a video about how to keep yourself
Yeah, there
safe
should be
around
video, and
dogs?
there should be basically workplace coaches who basically talk through the staff about the risks of dog attacks. I always believe that you're best speaking to your safety rep about dog attacks, especially so because the safety rep will have experience of dealing with dog attacks and will be able to speak to new starters. Should be an introduction to the safety rep on site, or the local CWU rep when new starters, start to work for Royal Mail, because they will have serious experience of dealing with dog attack risk issues. So they may be the best people to speak to. And they will explain situations like I've talked about, dynamic risk assessment processes, endorsing the mail, post and peg use, reporting dangerous dogs, because it's really important. We did see a lot of new starters being bit by dogs about 2 or 3 years ago. We did see a correlation between new starters and dog attacks. So that's why we push Royal Mail on the need for supplementary training. And there has been some work in that department. Liverpool University, for example, they do virtual reality training on dogs, where they have like a virtual dog and it displays aggression, and then the person who's in that room with the dog is then, it's a virtual room there, and their behavior is then monitored. And these new artificial, virtual reality training schemes are really good, and they're widely available too.
Claire Smith says, when a postie has been bitten and the process has been covered by the postie, why is it the manager will give the postie a letter to be posted to the owner about the dog's behaviour? So that does sound like a very annoying situation. So you're saying that this house has a dangerous dog, and then you're told, okay, deliver them a letter to tell them their dog is dangerous. What should someone do in that situation?
Well, it should be under the management of dog attack risk standard. It should be a manager going out, because there may be an interface between the dog owner and the actual person delivering the letter. So it needs to be a manager to explain potentially why the mail could be suspended. It's to avoid a conflict risk, so ideally it should be the manager delivering that letter.
Yeah. Okay. So that's really useful information. So if a manager tells you to deliver the letter about the dangerous dog, you can say it's you that should be delivering that letter.
Yeah, it's because there'll be a good chance there'll be a reaction as soon as the letter's delivered. Sometimes you may get a frustrated, customer wanting to, argue, and that's why it's always a manager who goes out and delivers the letter, and if necessary, speaks to the owner at the same time.
Yeah, because I suppose actually a frustrated customer who also has a dangerous dog is potentially not a combination that's sort of particularly comfortable to find oneself in. NJ says, most attacks in my office is someone doing the walk for the first time and didn't know the risk, unfortunately. So that would sort of make sense with what you were saying about new entrants being more likely to get bitten. Scott says, posting pegs are useless anyway. You've been nipped already by the time you realise there's a dog in there. And with the monumental amount of posts, there's no chance you're using a peg at every door. So presumably it takes a lot longer to post by using a peg than using your hands, right? So if you were to do that at every door,
it's not reasonably practical to use a post and peg at every single address. It's supposed to be used at dog hazards. So where we know there's a dog hazard at that particular address, that's when the post and peg's supposed to be used.
Anthony Rose says, I got bit by a dog, obviously told my manager. The address wasn't added to the potential hazards log on the frame and nothing done about the address. The dog owner wasn't even notified. So what should you do in that situation? I suppose talk to your union, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely, because that's a mandatory action. And again, if someone's been bitten, it's a crime. So that's reportable as a crime. So there's a set series of processes that should happen. Like those processes don't happen, then yeah, definitely speak to your safety rep or your area safety rep, because they will ensure that those processes do occur.
We've got an acronym I'm going to need you to help me with. But Lou Farrell says, what do we do with the ORA system, as it's not fit for purpose and very rarely updated? And why is it that when you get bitten, management always looks to blame you? So yeah, do you know what the ORA system would be referring to? And then also
that's the off-site risk assessment system, which is where hazards are captured, and so the likes of dog hazards are then captured and then populated and then returned back to hazard cards and on the PDAs as well, portable digital assistance. So it's like it's a system for capturing hazards and reporting them to frontline staff, but it probably does need updating, and we do know there's a few concerns over the off-site risk assessment system. So we are taking that feedback from colleagues and presenting it to Royal Mail.
Caldera says, I was bitten on my first day with the workplace coach, and then there's a laughing emoji. Says that the people go on around with the workplace coach sort of to get shown how to do the job, and then while that person was getting shown how to do the job, a dog bit them while they were posting. Is that have I got that right? Do you imagine, Jamie?
It should be, but these dogs can come out of anywhere, can't they? Very often we'll see dogs that appear out of nowhere from behind a gate or behind a car. So sometimes when you're approaching a property, people can't always see the dangers. But we do see these occasions where dogs do come out of nowhere and attack.
Okay, let's start to wrap up and end on, I suppose, sort of some final thoughts, some practical comments. And we sort of started this show by saying it's Dog Awareness Week. I suppose over the next few days, how is the CWU going to be spreading awareness? If members feel passionate about this, how can they get involved?
Yeah, well, there'll be another letter to branches coming out later this week. Obviously, our press statements have gone out as well. We're keen for people who are keen on this issue to get involved in the dog safety partnerships. If we've got people who this is a particularly keen issue for them, then they speak to us, because we've got people who work on the National Dog Safety Working Group. We've got people who work with councils, and like we've got the Merseyside Dog Safety Partnership, the Welsh Dog Safety Partnership. We've got partnerships in Yorkshire. So if anyone's keen on working in those partnerships or even attending a meeting, we have online meetings where there's discussions, and we can get invites to people who are really keen on doing more. We need as many people as we can support us on this.
Jamie McGovern, thank you so much for joining me. Really interesting, and you can tell that this is a issue that kind of animates people. As you say, you think it's the biggest occupational hazard on the job, so that doesn't mean it's very, very significant. Hopefully there'll be some movement when it comes to regulation. Actually, just one more, because I think this is very helpful. John Herbert says, each situation is different. The context of the dog, threat, and plausibility of an attack all have to be considered. And then this, I think, makes a lot of sense. He says, I find customers take great offence to being asked to secure their dog. and always. So is there a problem when, you try and advise a member of the public about how to keep Posties safe from their dog, and they sort of like say, "How dare you imply that my dog might be dangerous?" Is that something you
very
hear a
often.
lot? And how should
Yeah,
people?
very often, and there can be conflict risk between posties and customers. But that's why if there is a potential risk issue there, then we can use the local authorities to go out and visit and explain the fact that the dog is causing nuisance. The local manager should do that as well. But again, don't risk it. If you believe that dog is becoming a threat to you, suspend the delivery or return the mail and have a chat to your manager, your CWU rep, and then make sure there's an intervention at that property.
Nice. All right, that's all super helpful. Thank you so much for all of your comments and questions, people watching the live show. Jamie McGovern, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom on this topic.
No problem. Thank you.
And that does it for us this week. Thank you for tuning in to CWU Live. Again, next week it will be on that pay deal, so do make sure to tune in then. As ever, we really appreciate you watching and commenting and supporting us. So we'll see you again next week. Until then, stick with your union.